This TFMR podcast is brought to you by my friends at SD Bullion. SD Bullion always has some of the most competitive pricing in the business, so please be sure to visit sdbullion.com every time you're in the market for some physical precious metal. Greetings out there to everybody at TFMR and the world beyond. It is Wednesday, February the 25th, and it is time for your midweek conversation, that always free public podcast that you can take this link and distribute it, email it out, listen to it on your own free time. Something that I'd like you to do in particular this week, because I got a brand new guest for you. His name is Stuart Englert. Now, I first met Stuart a few months back. I was on a call with Rob Keentz, and Rob has known Stuart for a long time. And he was telling me about Stuart is telling me about some of his work. And I said, well, I got to get you on so we can talk about it. And in the time since, he has a new book that's come out in addition to his first book. So we're going to talk about both of those books today. I guess what drove him to write those books and where you can find them. So anyway, first of all, with that introduction, Stuart, thank you for spending some time with me.
You bet, Craig. Good to be with you for the first time, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again.
Yes, for sure. All right, let's just dive right in. I want to discuss both of the books that, if you're listening to this podcast, you can see there are links on this page so that you can go and buy them once you've listened to this podcast. We'll get to the new one in a second. I want to go back, though, to the first one you wrote called Rigged, with the subtitle Exposing the Largest Financial Fraud in History. As I understand it, Stuart, it's largely based on the work of Chris Powell and Bill Murphy at GATA, friends of mine for 15 years. Everybody on this site knows who they are. And, I just pull my hair out with these manipulation deniers and just shills for either their own services or for whomever that deny what has clearly been going on since at least 1975. But GATA has just this encyclopedic work of stuff they've compiled over the years. You did a wonderful job, though, of going through that work and putting it into book form. So let me just let you take it from there. Tell us about Rigged, what people will find when they buy and read the book, and what drove you to write it in the first place.
Okay, well, that's a good place to start. I think it was back in 2019 that, first of all, I've been following GATA for, 15, 20 years, okay? And I went to Chris Powell, their secretary treasurer, I think it was back in 2019, and I suggested that I could publish a book for him. I'm an editor, I'm a writer, and I'd been publishing books. And he declined because he said he was just too busy doing, the work at GATA and the daily dispatches and things. So I said, you know what? I've got to write this myself. So I spent about 2 or 3 months reading all the documentation that GATA has gathered since, I think, 1999. And I said, I'm gonna write this book. And by the way, I also donate 10% of the proceeds to GATA. But anyway, I published Rigged, Exposing the Largest Financial Fraud in Financial History in 2020. And the book documents manipulation and suppression of gold and silver prices. It analyzes and details the motives and motivations of price rigging by the central and bullion banks, Western governments, the International Monetary Fund, and the Bank of International Settlements. Now, this rigging was and is intended to defend the dollar and other Western financial currencies and the fiat monetary system, because, as we know, precious metals are a competitor to these unbacked debt-based currencies and the dollar-denominated monetary system. I guess that's a summation. Do you have any specific questions, Craig?
Well, I think most of us, like I said, we know GATA and we know the great work the guys have done, but you get drawn every once in a while. Let's put it this way: Chris will posting yeah, we wrote about this at GATA back in 2004. And there's so much information on that site. It's hard to go back and piece through it. And I think for me, that's the real value of what you did there, is that you kind of put it together in a narrative form
Yes,
And
and
it
and
would,
I
go
I,
ahead.
I appreciate that. And when it's a short book, by the way. It's under 100 pages, and I tried to write it concisely and in a form that the average reader uh, could understand. I wrote it as a primer for novices on the subject, and I hope I accomplished that. I will tell you that the book the book sales have far exceeded my expectations. I've sold over 3,600 copies, including over 600 copies in 12 foreign countries.
How about
So,
that?
and that's what astounded me, Craig. I thought this was primarily going to be a domestic issue you know, and sell among the niche of gold and silver stackers, but this went global, and I'm very happy and proud about that.
Sure. Is it still in print, Stuart? If somebody could somebody order a hard copy off of Amazon, or is it now in Kindle form?
It's in paperback and it is in ebook form. Yes, and it's available on Amazon and through Barnes and Nobles. Heck, you can even get it through Walmart. So it's available at any place you can get online books.
Well, so here's the thing for everybody listening. I mean, you know this is true. I'm speaking not to you, Stuart, but to everybody listening right now. You know this is true. You just and you sense it. That's how I came about to figure this out. Just watching gold and silver trade all day long. You're like, yeah, this is something funky's going on here. But again, when you get these people that don't understand that or don't understand why they want to buy precious metals because of this, buy a copy, buy three copies. Give one to your best friend, give one to your fuzzy-headed brother-in-law, the next time you see him that doesn't understand, why you're such an enthusiast on the precious metals. So, one last question about that book, sir. What was there anything that surprised you? When you're doing all this work compiling this, you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that. Holy smokes." Was there
Well,
anything come to mind?
in addition to the documents that I read and used inserted in the book that Gada had gathered, I also found some of my own documents. And one of them was a CIA document that explained how these this paper gold, if you will, was going to be used in place of the physical metal. Okay. And so that was astounding to me that our intelligence agencies, or at least one intelligence agency, knew about the purpose of these derivatives.
You crank out it's actually alchemy in the end.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
they tried to peg a physical price all the way through the London gold pool. When that failed, they had to come up with something new, and they
that's exactly right. That's
convince everyone
exactly
that
right.
it's as good as gold. And like you said, they do this in defense of their fiat currency. They
That is
can't have
correct.
the
They
competition.
come
But
up with these financial innovations, and it's all gobbledygook just to uh, leverage the debt, if you will, and control the markets.
yep.
That's the way I see it succinctly.
Well, it's interesting that they're somewhat losing control after all these years. And so, Stuart, that
And
leads
by
me
the way, I wrote about that, Craig.
that they
I
would
wrote about that.
eventually.
I have a Substack account, and I wrote an article in December titled "Unrigged: The Jig Is Up," in which I suggested that these record all-time high gold and silver prices indicate the breakdown or undoing of the derivative-driven markets. And here's my concluding paragraph. Over-leveraged banks and traders can and likely will continue to slam prices on occasion to reduce their losses and increase volatility in attempts to discourage precious metal purchases in the short term, but they can't halt the inflationary fiat spiral, change market fundamentals, or rapidly increase the supply of deliverable gold and silver. That's why the price rigging jig is up.
Well, there you go. Well, now I'm going to have to put that link on this page too, Stuart. I'm going to
I would
track that.
appreciate it. I
I
just
will.
started my Substack a little over a year ago. I've published, I don't know, 15 or 20 articles on there.
All right.
But I was the guy who wrote Rigged, and in December, when we saw what gold go up by 65% last year and
Yep.
and silver by 150% or something, 120 to 150%. I can't remember. I mean, that to me indicated that the jig is up, that the undoing is underway. And that's also prompted me to write publish, I should say, my new book, which I'd been working on for 8 years, titled Patient Millionaire. And I think that's where you wanted to probably go next anyway.
For sure. The other link on this page is Stuart's new book called Patient Millionaire, a financial memoir. Um, yes, I want to have you describe this book to everybody. You were telling me before we got started that you're approaching a milestone birthday, and recognizing that was all part of what got you into the precious metals in the first place. And so, why don't we go all dial this clock back a few years, a decade or two, and I'll let you pick up the story from there that ultimately led you to this second book.
Sure. Well, I'm going to be 65 this year, so I'm going to be applying for Social Security. But sometime back in even my college days, I was questioning the financial system, the monetary system. I was always curious how it was that the U.S. government could always borrow more and spend more than it was taking in. It just didn't make sense to me. It didn't make financial or common sense to me. So I published this financial memoir, Patient Millionaire, last month after I became a patient millionaire because of my research that I started 3 or 4 decades ago. And the book chronicles my multi-decade journey of discovery in which I researched the US dollar and the global monetary system, and lost long-term faith in the dollar and other fiat currencies. And that's why I put my trust in precious metals with the thought of I needed to save some money for retirement, and I didn't trust the depreciating dollar. So my journey of discovery actually began in the 1980s and 90s when I questioned how the federal government could accumulate an ever larger public debt by perpetually spending more than its incoming revenue. Like I said, it just didn't make sense to me. So in the book, I intertwine political and geopolitical events with the findings of my research over the last 4 decades, along with my personal reflections and story of frugality and perseverance in the face of mainstream antagonism against the ownership of gold and silver. So I published the book last month in January after precious metal prices hit their all-time high, and I became a long-suffering bullionaire. That's another way of saying a millionaire after 20 years of investing in mining stocks and metals. And by the way, Craig, I also included a quote from you in the book about derivatives, since it succinctly describes the problem with financial derivatives and the conundrum that the metal markets and negative short sellers now face. And I'd like to read that quote if you don't mind.
By all means.
Well, you wrote in the TF Metals report in 2018, which was very visionary as I see it. You said the prices of gold and silver are currently determined by the trading of digital derivatives, which have next to zero connection to the physical metal. You continue. The price that is discovered is the price of the digital derivative itself and not the physical commodity. And the supply of the digital derivative is nearly endless, as the banks have a monopolistic ability to create a nearly infinite amount. You were spot on, Craig, and you helped educate me on this subject. Let me tell you that.
Well, it's kind of you to say. Hopefully, their ability is coming to an end. It certainly seems that way. But you touched on it, the patient millionaire. I get and I value. I don't want to make it sound like I don't value, because I value every email I get. There were people that say things like, I'd have given up in 2016. If it wasn't for your site, or given up in 2020 or 19 or 20, all these different years along the way. But now we've got people on this site that talk about being in the 7-figure club, is what they call it. And I think it's the same thing as what you're saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It it was hard to swim upstream all those years. I started investing in mining stocks and metals back in, let me get this right here. Well, it's 20 years ago in 2006. Okay. And I've been keeping it up ever since. But like I said, it was hard to swim upstream when there were a lot of naysayers and mainstream advisors that were saying it was a bad idea,
Right.
and there was no reason to get into metals, and you should, follow the stocks and bonds and this, and after 2000, I learned a lesson in 2008 when my Roth IRA lost half of its value. That helped me wake me up as well. I knew that it's not just the gold and silver markets that are rigged. It's all these financial markets.
Hmm.
They're over leveraged. They're manipulated, and so it's hard to trust in anything other than something that's been around for thousands of years and used as money.
Yeah. I like to say, Stuart, the fallacy that most financial advisors and individuals say, they look at the dollar as the stable unit of account and everything else fluctuates against it. And they come to this conclusion that gold is somehow expensive. And what the mistake they make is that gold is the stable unit. I mean, it truly is. It's a pet rock. It sits there and collects dust. It is the stable unit against everything else is measured. And that's, you got to really kind of stand it on its head to be able to understand that. And very few people are able to do that.
Yeah, we must distinguish between price inflation and monetary inflation. And that's a tough one for the average person that only deals in dollars to understand. And it's something, that I think as inflation rears its ugly head, more and more people are figuring out what causes monetary inflation and price inflation. And it's the expansion of the money supply or currency supply, we should say.
Yeah. Stuart, neither you nor I are going about giving financial advice to anybody, but we can at least talk about our own experiences. So let's just kind of close with this question. The patient millionaire, here you are, as are so many that have stayed the course and dollar cost averaged, and just knowing the math was the math, they knew that, these days were coming. But a lot of talk now about, okay, so now what do you do? Do you take some, lock in gains, that kind of stuff? What's your personal strategy? Are you looking to be the patient multimillionaire, or are you? What are your thoughts at this point?
As I explain in my book, as I conclude, I never plan to be rich. I'm a simple guy. I'm a simple man. I garden, okay? I'm earthly. I want to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining. Greed is not in my interest. I just wanted enough to retire on. And I also I wrote the book primarily to educate my family and friends,
Yeah.
the ones that I was talking to about metals 20 years ago, okay? And the problem we have with our debt and deficits. So no, I'm going to be 65. I'm going to start spending. Uh, I've got cash in the bank that's losing value.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to start spending money. It's time to retire, and live the good life, if you will. My biggest problem, Greg, is going to be I've been so frugal and prudent through the years. It's going to be breaking this habit of saving. That's going to be the biggest problem for me because I'm a saver. Even as a
Right.
kid, when I delivered the newspaper to my neighbors, I was a paper boy. I used to save the nickels, dimes, and pennies, and I've done that throughout my life. So I'm going to have to dislearn
Yeah.
saving. Okay.
Can't take it with you, they say.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. It's
We all run the risk of, living a long time and outliving our assets and that sort of thing. But you're right. I mean, I see it I've in my own family. It's not necessarily a generational thing, but you get it in your mind that, oh, I've just got to keep saying, I don't want to, and you've got all this money that you could either be spending and having some fun with, helping others in your family with, you
Yep.
know? I mean, it's more valuable to give some money away now to your children or your nieces and nephews or whatever than giving it to them when you croak.
And it
So,
wouldn't be bad to give them gold or silver. As you know,
yeah,
I gave my niece. I used to give my nieces back in the 1980s U.S. savings bonds, and then
yeah.
then I figured out I shouldn't. So I started giving them American Silver Eagles. You know, and so that was my way of educating them or trying to educate them about the value of precious metals.
Right.
And I hope that lesson and my book will help convey that.
Brilliant stuff, Stuart. So let's, all right. So rigged, again, buy a couple of copies and give them away to people. It's not like and it's not some encyclopedic book of, 500 pages. This is something so people can understand, what has been going on and how this impacts things going forward. The Patient Millionaire, also in hard copy, but also downloadable, all that stuff.
Yes, it's available in hard copy, even have an ebook,
There you
an
go.
ebook and an audio book and a paperback. So, take your choice, however you like to take in some information.
Do you read the audiobook yourself, Stuart, in your dulcet Tennessean tones?
I do not. I have to say, I fumble up too much when I read, something aloud. So
Right.
I left it to the AI geniuses at Amazon to
Ah,
do it. So
perfect.
I hope you like the voice. There were like 30 voice choices, and it was tough to pick one that I liked, but I settled on one and I said, let's go with this. I'd never published an audio book before, primarily because I'm not a good reader. But anyway, it is available, and I think it's just for a couple bucks. You can get the
Yeah.
audiobook.
There you go. That'll get you, if you're taking a road trip, that'll help you too.
There you go. And
Stuart,
a lot of people, I have to read. I have to read a physical copy myself to absorb information. But some people do very well by listening.
hmm Mrs. F walks around the house all day long listening to stuff. And that's a very popular way to do it these days. So it's good to know that that's available for everybody as well. So there you go, everybody. There's your marching orders. Check out Stuart's books. Check out his Substack as well. And Stuart, all I left to do is thank you for doing all of this. Thank you for compiling all that information from Gaddis so that we have that in one place. And let's see if we can't keep in touch and do another podcast sometime soon.
Sounds so good, Craig. You take good care, and thanks for the invitation. I appreciate you publicizing my books and my content, and it's been a joy to do because that's what I am. I'm a writer and editor, so it's it's my calling, I guess you'd say.
If you're going to put that much time in, you want somebody to read it for crying out loud. So
That's true. That's true too, Craig. And I,
we're
I
going to,
appreciate everyone that picks up my books.
we'll find some somebodies for you. All right. Well, thank you, Stuart. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm sure you enjoyed this podcast. We'll try to have another midweek or Thursday conversation for you as soon as next week.